Hi, I'm Jim Anderton, Director of Content here at engineering.com. Right now, in Paris, France, the world's leaders are meeting at the United Nations Conference on Climate Change, COP21. Now, the global media, they're all over this event, and they're branding it as a last chance to reduce carbon emissions and keep global temperature rise within the limits that current science demands to avoid dangerous climate change. Now, I think this is yet another massive United Nations bureaucracy fest, with numerous communiques, press releases, position papers, sound bites, and press analysis. This time, however, I think it's different. The discussion on whether or not consumption of fossil fuels is causing global climate change is essentially over. Because whether or not you agree with the premise that fossil fuel combustion causes climate change, CO2 reduction has become a sort of global meme, and this alone means that for all intents and purposes, it's fact. Now, the COP21 conference intends to establish rules for reducing the amount of atmospheric CO2 in industrial nations, and this has major implications for manufacturers all over the world. Look, manufacturing needs power. It needs lots of it. It needs reliable power, and it needs it at the lowest possible cost. Right now, the combustion of fossil fuels is just the cheapest and most reliable way of powering modern economies. Are there realistic options? Well, the nuclear industry is stagnant, with the shadow of Fukushima and Chernobyl hobbling any public relations effort to generate support for the newer, more promising technologies. Wind power, well, that's always been driven by geography, and it's just too intermittent to generate the considerable baseload required by industry. Geography and geology similarly constrain geothermal and tidal sources. So what about solar? Now, it's getting cheaper, yes, but nothing like cheap enough to power manufacturing industries on a large scale. There are manufacturers moving towards solar, however. An example I've seen recently is machine tool manufacturer DMG Morisiki, whose Frunz in Germany plant is partially powered by both photovoltaics and a wind turbine. For the majority of industry, however, off-grid alternates are still not a viable economic option. Now, environmentalists, of course, they claim that they would be viable if fossil fuel-based energy sources included the environmental costs of the pollutants they emit. Now, this is probably true, but it papers over the ugly reality that making energy much more expensive means less disposable income for the majority of the world's population and a lower standard of living for everyone. Now, I believe this is irrelevant to the elites that are meeting in Paris right now. They know, for example, that they can't confiscate your car, but they can make it significantly more expensive to operate, which will have the same effect on CO2 reduction. The goal appears to be to create an even deeper global manufacturing recession, then declare victory as the lower energy consumption that results reduces atmospheric CO2 levels. In effect, carbon pricing punishes ordinary people for simply living their lives. But there's a better way, I think. What's needed isn't a global cap and trade or taxation system. What the planet needs is photovoltaic technology that's installed at 10 cents a watt. Now, I've been following photovoltaics as an alternate energy source for my own home for about 30 years, and it certainly has become cheaper, but like fusion energy, it always seems 20 or 30 years away from real viability. If the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change was truly serious, they would turn to member nations to fund a massive global sort of super Manhattan project with the goal of mass-producing modular photovoltaics that are an order of magnitude cheaper than the products we have today. If I could power my home entirely with $4,000 worth of solar panels, I'd do it tomorrow, but not at $40,000, and it's the same for industry. So why won't the UN and the world leaders do it? Mainly because the world leaders are drawn from a political class that excludes scientists and engineers. They're legislators, not problem solvers. If the UN were serious, they'd put together a panel of 10 or 20 of the world's best manufacturing and production engineers, then build a network of gigafactories around the world. Now, Tesla's taking a small step in this direction, but for true economies of scale, a manufacturing system needs to be big, much, much bigger. The Paris conference, by adopting a strategy of carbon pricing, will slam the brakes on this manufacturing innovation and set us back a decade at least in the goal toward renewable, clean energy. Decades from now, historians will think we were nuts.